We are about to have a very interesting conversation. I wanted to make a video about Bob and what his potential future might be in the MCU. And then, because I haven't read a lot of Sentry comic books, I wasn't really reading the Avengers too much at the time that he was a front character. I looked into it and I was like, this character's ridiculously complex and meta. British comic book writers. I love them, but also they sometimes really go crazy. But anyway, I think I actually came up with some really interesting potential ideas and also some observations and some interesting parallels. So I can't wait to have this conversation with you and hear your thoughts down below. Both those of you who are new to how awesome Sentry is and those of you who did read those comic books by Paul Jenkins. All right, so what are we going to do about Bob? Kevin Feige has taken a complex niche character from the pages of Marvel Comics and made him not just extremely powerful and really sold it, right? Like, it really works, but also very popular. The internet is already asking an extremely important question. Who would win in a fight, Sentry or Wanda? Oh, Wanda, I love Wanda. And that not only begs the question, which one is more powerful, but does the MCU now have themselves a male version of Wanda? I think they might. Oh my goodness. Both characters are personally very vulnerable and therefore sympathetic and relatable, coupled with extreme power, which makes the fans who can relate to Bob and Wanda's vulnerability feel empowered. Extreme weakness and extreme strength coexisting. That is an intoxicating combination. I mean, it's really fantastic that Wanda worked out so well, but now that a male version of Wanda essentially has worked out just as well, we see a formula, a pattern emerging, and in even more ways, because you know what else is going on with both these characters right now? They're benched. I know, it's unbelievable, the parallels here, because Feige is trying to decide what to do with both of them. Now, we can already see Wanda's potential future, which makes it all the more frustrating that it's taking so long to get there. We're like, we see the witch's road, so to speak, right there. Walk down it. But, reuniting with Wiccan and Speed, and, maybe becoming frenemies with Agatha, and likely somehow tying into the Doom storyline. Wanda now also has her own corner of the MCU, thanks to Jack Schaefer, and Sentry has the Thunderbolts, aka the new Avengers now. Well, Beef director Jake Schreier and Beef showrunner Lee Sung-jin, who did, by the way, extensive uncredited rewrites on Thunderbolts, well, these two guys get to build out the Thunderbolts corner of the MCU. We'll see. Today, though, we're going to take a look at Sentry's comic book history and consider how he might fit into the MCU, which characters he might interact with, and some concerns that I have based on how other characters like Wanda have been treated. All right, let's go. So, why is Bob so valuable to Kevin Feige? In some ways, he might even be more valuable than Wanda. Let me explain. But make no mistake, the core, the foundation of Bob's appeal comes from Wanda, because Wanda fans love this guy. Now, Wanda fans are largely, I think, supported by Marvel's female and LGBTQ fans who are very vocal online, really can help blow a character up. And for instance, it's those two groups that got Agatha all along to perform better than Daredevil Born Again. Thank you very much. And Wanda and Agatha fans love Yelena, as I predicted, because I am one of you. And our love for Yelena, as Yelena kind of like turned to Bob, we did as well. Yelena was like, oh, Bob, I want to take care of you. And we were like, us too, we love Bob. And so I think that has been a wonderful development for the Bob character. But there's another group of fans, largely male, that feel left out of recent MCU stories. And not only Bob, but also John Walker, aka US Agent. We talked about this actually on a recent live stream. These characters are huge olive branches to that group. Now, of course, there are some toxic fans who will never be satisfied, who don't want to be satisfied. And they have criticized Thunderbolts for its weak portrayal of its strong male characters, which is absolutely ridiculous because, you can see how well both Bob and John Walker are being received by a large group of people. Now, in our discussion about Thunderbolts, Some of you pointed out that Bob and John have a similar vibe to Ken from Barbie. I love this. Where not only is male toxicity addressed in a constructive and inclusive manner, but these characters are also case studies of the very harmful societal practice of dismissing men's feelings, their emotions, and their loneliness. Now, of course, everyone in Thunderbolts is lonely. Yelena herself has an epic line about how she feels so alone. She is so alone. And the current loneliness epidemic in the real world is hurting a broad spectrum of people. Wanda, by the way, also very lonely, and I think a lot of people relate to her as well on the same wavelength. But with Bob, John, and Ken, men are being included in this discussion as well. I think that's really, really exciting. A lot of men, I think some men really liked Ken, right? But I see a lot of Marvel male fans who maybe were a little bit feeling disenfranchised from the MCU recently, really gravitating to Bob and John. But yet at the same time, these characters are still liked by those of us who like Wanda and Yelena. That kind of broad appeal is rare, and that's really exciting. It's an exciting opportunity for Marvel. Now, this hasn't really been reflected in the box office just yet, because previous projects have inflicted tremendous harm on the Marvel brand. And it might take a while, therefore, for a lot of people to discover these exciting new characters. Maybe they will, on digital, or they might wait all the way until it hits Disney Plus down the line. But I think that as popular as these characters are right now, particularly Bob, I think that popularity will only grow. Here's hoping that Avengers Doomsday realizes what it has, and not just Bob, but also John, and doesn't undo all of the tremendous emotional exploration and respect for them that we've seen in Thunderbolts. Like Multiverse of Madness harmed Wanda. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what I'm really nervous about. And this is another problem that comes from overproduction. Doomsday is filming right now as Thunderbolts just hits theaters, making it harder to pivot and incorporate some of the unexpected ways that audiences are reacting to these characters in Thunderbolts. Like, oh my gosh, Bob is a superstar. I wish we'd known that before we started rolling camera. I mean, of course they can make tweaks. Marvel, in fact, is famous, and some would say even infamous, for last-minute changes. So maybe they might be able to do some of that. But if you really want to have this organic element where it's layered through the whole project, you need to have that insight early on. The excuse they had for Multiverse of Madness is that WandaVision was still being filmed when they went into production on Multiverse of Madness. But as I've pointed out, they could have read the scripts or talked to Jack Schaefer and Mark Shackman to really get an idea of what WandaVision was saying. All right, so maybe we'll get another Thunderbolts movie down the line, but it probably won't be until the very earliest, 2028. And after Doomsday and Secret Wars, who knows what shape these characters will be in by then? I mean, again, because as I just said, look at how Multiverse of Madness, despite its success, totally derailed Wanda, and she still has yet to return. So when I was looking into the history of Sentry in the comics, I was pleasantly surprised at how comics accurate the Thunderbolts movie is. For instance, Bob's history of drug use before he becomes Sentry, from the comics. The Golden Guardian of Good, the mouthful that Ox Group PR comes up with for Sentry, that's actually from the comics. And the movie, it's as accurate as it can be, because I said the original storylines for Sentry are just extremely meta from writer and co-creator Paul Jenkins, that UK comic book writer I was telling you about. In fact, in some of the Sentry comic books, Jenkins even shows up himself as the writer of the Sentry comic, and they're having conversations with him. And, the MCU, as we always say, Kevin Feige says, let's keep it simple. And he he used to do it just right. He would strip down these stories just enough to make them fit into the space of a movie, and so that normies could understand the storylines. These days, I think he strips them down a little bit too much. And he was supposed to have the TV space to be able to tell the more complex stories. And sometimes that has worked. For instance, one example is Moon Knight. And there are, yes, I think you're starting to probably see it, actually quite a number of similarities, not only between Sentry and Wanda, but also between Sentry and Moon Knight. So in the comics, as you can sort of see in the movie already, Bob, Sentry, and the Void are actually three separate entities. I think it's tempting to believe that Sentry is just Bob, but no, it's a third entity. Just like you have Mark, Steven, and then it's revealed Jake. We never got Jake. Where is Moon Knight season 2? We're going to talk about that. But in the comics, Bob is the main identity. And he created a hero, Sentry, and a villain, the Void, with both of those entities not only fighting each other, but for control of Bob, right? Now, that struggle could be used in the MCU, having the Sentry persona and the Void persona kind of fight each other, right? But it's a different origin, because in the MCU, they established that Bob has always had a split personality. There were two, but then when Ox Group gave Bob superpowers, they gave superpowers to Bob, but also to his dark side. So that's very interesting. So as I said, I think a third persona was created. It's noted that Bob, in the notes for Ox Group, that Bob, during the Sentry initial trial, he experienced delusions of grandeur. And you see that when he's talking to Val and referring to himself as a god. So again, instead of Sentry and the Void springing out of Bob as they do in the comics, in the MCU, it's Bob and the Void, and then Sentry's the last to the party. He's the third identity as like an offshoot of Bob. It's very interesting. Now, you'll note that after defeat, and so this could be further explored. So you'll note that after defeating the Void, Bob's hair turned back to Bob Brown, right? And so just as he slowly turns ink black and becomes a shadow when he becomes the Void, maybe in the future, when he becomes the Sentry again, his hair will go back to being blonde. Just like when he starts to utilize his Sentry powers, you can see in the movie, his eyes start to turn gold. So I think that's very interesting, and you could carry that out with his hair as well. So how do you see the Bob Void Sentry dynamic, and how do you think it would be best set up for the purposes of the MCU? So as I looked into Sentry's comic book history, I was looking for a lot of things, but one of the main things for the purposes of this video was to find comic book stories that he had that could be adapted into the MCU. And I gotta tell you, he was really lacking in that department. I mean, a lot of his stories are about figuring out the Bob Sentry Void dynamic. I mean, for a long time, people don't even know that the Sentry and Void are the same person. So we just did that, though. They condensed that into a single movie, so we can't do that again. And then also, he, of course, was a big part of the Dark Avengers storyline, where Norman Osborn manipulated him, just like Val manipulates Bob Sentry Void in the movie. So we've already done that as well. Now, in the comics, he also has a wife, Lindy Lee, who factors into a number of his stories. But as a fellow Yelena Bob shipper, I say, don't you dare bring in a girlfriend or a wife for Bob. Although some of you, I've seen also on the internet a debate about this as well. So do you see a Yelena and Bob spark? Are they a potential super couple? Not just like Natasha and Bruce, that one didn't really work out, but I see shades of Wanda and Vision there. Quite the connection. Or would you prefer to see them instead as friends/siblings? In the comics, the fight between the Sentry and the Void does continue, even past figuring out they're all the same person. Sometimes it's argued that Bob unknowingly, subconsciously, uses this hero and villain to be able to do both good and bad. And at the end of the day, his ledger is balanced. He doesn't have any red in his ledger because he's making up for the bad that he does. It's like cut down a tree, plant one. Bob's the superhero version of that in a nutshell, I guess. But in the Thunderbolts movie, clearly it's Bob versus the Void. The MCU Sentry hasn't even met the Void yet, which has a lot of potential going forward. That could be very interesting. Now, how could Sentry and the Void meet? Because obviously they're both Bob. Well, in the comics, Bob at one point is able to split in two in the physical world. So both Sentry and the Void exist in, the physical realm simultaneously. But in the MCU, that could technically maybe happen. We'll see. But still, right now, Bob the Void and now Sentry surely all exist in Bob's mind. So they could certainly meet within Bob's mind, and perhaps even the Void and Sentry could meet in Bob's mind with Bob not even knowing about it, which I like a lot. I think that has a lot of potential. They might even come up with a plan to share Bob without him even knowing it, right? This sounds like a familiar storyline to me. Right? It sounds familiar. Did they talk about this a little bit in Moon Knight too? I don't know. Eventually they all got along and it was adorable. Well, at least Steven and Mark did. Jake, last minute promise for season 2, which never happened. Stop saving stuff for later seasons that never happen or movies. So yes, they could try to share Bob, right? And when we first heard that Sentry was going to be in the Thunderbolts movie, and a number of us imagined a scenario where you were never quite sure what Bob you were talking to. So you would think it would be easy. One has brown hair, one has gold hair and eyes, and the other one is a shadow. But maybe there could be maybe we could evolve to a part where it becomes more subtle and you have to really look in Bob's eyes to see who you're talking to. But that I think could be really, really interesting. Similar to Moon Knight. Sometimes you don't know who you're talking to there. Now, what are we going to do about Moon Knight, right? I mean, he was also very popular, although it's been quite the minute at this point. And he was very charming as well, played by Oscar Isaac, but only moderately powerful. Not as powerful as Sentry. Sentry is phenomenal, although therefore also more expensive to produce. But Moon Knight was supposed to get a season 2. They even seemed to announce it on social media with a fantastical video. Can the MCU have multiple characters with multiple personalities? I think it's tough. It might be confusing. What would you do? What would you do when it comes to Sentry and Moon Knight in the MCU? Would you try and do both? Would you prioritize one over the other? Again, what would you do? Then finally, let's take a look at who Bob Sentry the Void might interact with in the MCU. Realistically, sorry Moon Knight, I don't think you're getting the call. But I've based this on not just the comics, but the characters who are currently available or who will shortly be available in the MCU. So in the comics, both Mr. Fantastic and Doctor Strange tried to help Bob figure out who he was. In fact, Doctor Strange was partially responsible for Bob not remembering who he was, because there was a big memory mind wipe plot, not just for Bob, but for the whole world. And you might be like, that sounds familiar. And that's because it is familiar. They just did that with Peter Parker. And I think even the screenwriter mentioned that. So they can't do that with Sentry. But anyway, there is a Mr. Fantastic Doctor Strange history there. Anyway, because of Bob's mental state and how powerful he is, I see the MCU magical community taking a particular interest in him. Not only because they could maybe help him navigate his mind, but also they might be the only ones who could who have even a chance at containing him. And I would say that after his experience with Ox Group, I don't see Bob trusting anyone in the science community anytime soon. So, sorry, Mr. Fantastic, Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Shuri, Riri, and Hank Pym, right? I think Bob would be like, get away from me. But you know who has both science and magical abilities? Why, that's Mr. Victor Von Doom. I'm sorry, doctor. I'm sorry, he's a doctor. He went to medical school and everything. All right, Dr. Victor Von Doom. Now played, of course, by Robert Downey Jr., who never met a fancy, shiny toy in the Marvel Universe that he didn't want. And I wonder what he thinks of Sentry. So perhaps Bob will be drawn to Doom, who has the science knowledge to understand what Ox Group did to his body, but also the magical abilities to help Bob navigate the problems he was already having with his mind. Oh, that's great! And which Ox Group has made worse. So Doom has the abilities to maybe fix Bob's body and his mind, or at least that might be the promise that he makes to Bob. Oh, I love it! But of course, we have a long history at this point of coming up with better ideas than Marvel does itself. How is that possible? This idea, when you really just take a few minutes to think about it, just leaps out at you. How is nobody at Marvel finding these obvious ideas? All right, so in the magical group, we've got, of course, Doctor Strange, Wanda. I mean, I guess it would be cool to see them fight, but I'd really love to see Wanda and Sentry talk and potentially team up. How about that for a potential development? Then Wiccan. I think Wiccan, of course, would be fantastic. And I think even Loki, who looks like he's going to be getting out of that chair soon because he's in Doomsday. He can't stay in that chair forever. He better not stay in that chair forever. I think Loki would take tremendous interest in Bob, Sentry, and the Void. I mean, Loki, because Loki's a nice guy, but he's still not that nice. And I think he would see tremendous, not only interest, but opportunity in this individual. And of course, as the X-Men enter the chat, telepaths! You've got Jean Grey, an Omega-level telepath and telekinetic, who could certainly, I think, not only help Bob, but handle Bob. And then also, of course, Professor X, and then even Emma Frost, who suddenly, I bet, got a real boost over in the offices of Marvel thanks to her sudden popularity on Marvel Rivals. But you know, Kevin Feige, his bench is deep, frustratingly deep. And on that note, as Feige has too deep a bench and too many projects coming out, You know, it's crazy. Like, there's too many projects coming out at once, but then at the same time, if there's only one project a year, he has so many characters he needs to get to at this point. How long are we going to have to wait to see them back again? It's a real problem. And, you know, who knows what shape Bob will be in after appearing in one, if maybe not two, hugely crowded group films. Again, we saw what happened to Wanda after they put her in someone else's film. After what's hopefully the monumental events of Doomsday and Secret Wars, will audiences even want to go back to Thunderbolts and Bob? We're all very interested in them right now, but we might become very distracted after these next two movies and next 2 years. I mean, especially with Feige promising that it's next up is time to focus on the X-Men. We might be like, yeah, the Bob and the Thunderbolts were great 2 years ago, but give me my new X-Men. I mean, let's see. I mean, Bob could be maybe friends with the X-Men. Like, go, as I said, go find a telepath. But the X-Men have their own things they have to do besides help Bob. They have their own storylines to deal with. Will we ever get back to the Thunderbolts? Honestly, at this point, I think it's impossible to tell because we have no idea where we'll be in 2 years, both in terms of story and also in terms from a business and fan perspective, how people feel about Marvel. But I mean, I would think we would surely see Bob, Sentry, and the Void again because just of how awesome and powerful and popular they are. But then I would add to that, where the heck is Wanda? All right, so share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.